I just can't imagine, for example, being a Jewish person in that crowd. I read this morning in the Daily Mirror, the associate editor, Tom Bryant, said that over the course of 2.5 hours, that little part of Worthy Farm became a snarling cesspit of hate. This is a man who was there in that crowd. He said that all ages were represented. He talks about a man in his 60s, an old lady next to him draped in Palestinian flags. And he says that festival goers were splattered with fake blood. There were apparently people with fire extinguishers, he says, filled with fake blood, spraying it across the crowd. This doesn't sound like a music festival to me. It sounds like a hate fest. And watching the footage, it sounded something like a Nazi rally, actually. And many Jewish people who I've spoken to since then have said exactly that. It was chilling for them to see it. And it's not just Jews. Plenty of non-Jews also watched that and were utterly horrified by what they saw.
How about this as an argument, though? The IDF is a big military force. It's been credibly accused of war crimes. People are entitled to chant obscenely, savagely, critically, emotionally about a military body that's not going to suffer any cost of this. It's not undermined or weakened. It's not threatened by this. It's a big military force. Are people not entitled to express a strong view about a big military force?
Firstly, I think chanting for anyone's death at a music festival is a little bit unusual. The last music festival I remember hearing chants for death was the Nova Festival on the 7th of October 2023, when Palestinian terrorists came in, actually parachuted in, some of them, and killed people, as they called for death. So hearing for chants of death at a music festival is already, I think, something which should set alarm bells ringing. And then death to the IDF, I mean, that might be your opinion, that you think it is a worthy chant because it's an army engaged in a war to protect the Israeli people.
I'm not saying it's a worthy chant. I'm saying there's a distinction between criticising a body, an armed body, and criticising people. I'm asking you whether you think there is
armed bodies are made up of people. The people of the IDF saved my life over the last 2 weeks as I was hiding in bomb shelters in Israel from massive ballistic missiles launched by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, who were trying to kill civilians in Israel and were successful 28 times. It's only thanks to the intervention of the IDF that I and millions of Israelis could feel safer in those bomb shelters with interceptions going on. No, come off it. Chanting for the death of troops is sick. These people decided to chant for the death of the IDF, not the IRGC, by the way. I wouldn't have particularly wanted to hear them chanting for that either. Not for the death of Hamas, who started this horrible war that's been the root cause of what's been going on over the last 20 months. No, they chose to chant for the soldiers, the men and women of Israel, mostly Jewish, who are defending the Jewish state against genocidal ideologies and bodies. And Pascal Robinson Foster, the man that stood on the stage and chanted that, did so because he knew it would get him this level of fame and adoration among some. It's distressing to see someone like that trying to do that. It's distressing to see a crowd of thousands of people with large portions of them joining in. This is not something British people want to see, Jewish and non-Jewish. They don't want to see people in a festival crowd baying for blood, chanting for the death of people, whether or not they're soldiers who are defending a liberal democracy in Israel, or whether or not they're anyone else. This is not normal behavior, and anyone that is trying to contextualize it and say that it is normal behavior needs to think really seriously about their actions. The people who didn't cut the microphones, who didn't cut the cameras, also need to think about it.
For the BBC, do you think they're culpable in this?
Of course they are. I mean, more than the fact that they broadcast it without any hesitation, the BBC has been pumping out, spewing a narrative of lies over the last 20 months and for years before, which has caused low IQ individuals like this Pascal Robinson Foster to spew this stuff. It's caused the people in that crowd, who don't know very much probably on the whole about this area of the world or geopolitics in general, to chant for the death of the army of the Jewish state. That's what's caused this. So the BBC aren't just culpable for broadcasting this bile, this Nazi-style hate fest, this rally of hatred. They're also responsible and culpable because they have led the people of Great Britain and the world to this position where they find it so easy to believe such obvious falsehoods as 14,000 babies are going to die tomorrow, a statistic which, nobody should have repeated unquestioningly just because it sounds so preposterous and unreliable. The BBC have broadcast on their Arabic channel plenty of hatred and lies about Israel that they've had to apologise for. They have journalists working for them who celebrated October the 7th on their social media. Jeremy Bowen said that Israel had flattened a hospital which it hadn't struck and which hadn't been flattened. The BBC has example after example of lies, falsehoods, mistakes, errors, whatever you want to call them, about Israel, massively out of proportion, massively disproportionate with the mistakes they make about any other news story. There is an agenda going on here, whether they know it or not, whether it's hidden or not. It's not very well hidden, I would say, whether it's deliberate or not on the part of everyone pursuing it and putting it out there. But it's having an effect. The main effect is on the Jewish people. And in answer to your question earlier, does this really affect the IDF? Of course it doesn't affect the IDF. Those brave men and women will keep on fighting to protect their country and their citizens. But it does affect Jewish people here, because when people like Pascal Robinson Foster stand there and chant about Zionists and his previous bald-headed C-word of a boss who was a Zionist, we know what he's really referring to. We know what those people cheering him on and demanding that he name the man are really referring to. And I think that Jewish people in this country and non-Jewish people who care about Jew hatred are deeply concerned to see this. More and more Jewish people in this country than I have ever known are talking about leaving very seriously. And let me say this, when the Jews have left, this won't be over. This sort of hatred is not aimed exclusively at Jewish people. Jews have a timing problem in that we are often the first victims of this kind of hatred and of extremist Islamic hatred and terrorism, but we're not the last. Okay. And I think that people who don't stand up against this now, or whoever the victims are need to ask themselves very carefully and very seriously why.
Jonathan, just before you go, we've been talking about this a lot this morning. A lot of people would say there's a moral equivalence argument that they want to make here, which is that discussions of chants at a hippie festival are one thing. The conduct of the Israeli army in Gaza is quite another. And actually, they feel this is a distraction to talk about this. This isn't morally as difficult a problem as the problem of what Israel is doing to the people of Gaza.
Well, if you want to invite me on to discuss the intricacies of the IDF's actions over the last 20 months and before that, I'd be more than happy to do that. It's an area I know quite a lot about. I think that this sort of moral equivalence is utterly preposterous. The topic that we're discussing today is the vile hatred that was spewed at the Glastonbury Festival, overseen by Sir Michael Eavis, by Pascal Robinson Foster. Yes, we can discuss the IDF if you want to, but I don't know how much longer you've got in this slot for me to do that. I think it's rather unfair to try and spring that question. It's a kind of gotcha question. What do you think about the IDF?
It's absolutely not a gotcha question. It's a question of this issue of moral...
Okay, let's spend 10 minutes on it. Let's spend 10 minutes discussing that.
No, I raised it to give you a chance to answer that point, because it's a point that on some people's minds as we're having this conversation.
Okay, the IDF is fighting a war.
But you've answered the question. That's fair enough, Jonathan. But it's not a gotcha question. I think it's a legitimate way of just exploring some of the moral sides to this story. Jonathan, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.